What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. Today I'm joined by Jacob Kelly. Jacob's been around the world twice, talked to everyone once, made 2 tweets go viral, been in 3 influencer events, and even knows a NASA scientist who traveled the world playing a flute. Jacob pushes post sports sweeter and more completer than any other post pusher around. He's a hard-bodied, hairy-chested, rooted, tootin', shootin', parachuting, demolition, double cap crippin' social media expert. There ain't nothing he can't do. No sky too high, no sea too rough, no podcast too tough. He's learned a lot of lessons in life. Never shoot a large frame photo with a small frame camera. He's launched all types of social media campaigns, 2x, 4x, 6x, and those big ones that crash your computer when you go live. Anything in life worth doing is worth overdoing. Moderation is for cowards. He's a lover, he's a fighter, he's an OSEG revenue driver. He'll wine, dine, intertwine, then push out a social post when the refueling's done. So if you're feeling froggy, then you better leave because this Jacob's been there, done that, and is coming back for more. Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Holy shit. I definitely could tell just from that intro that you used to do hip hop. There's one part in there where I was just like, it sounds like you're delivering a verse.
Well, you can tell, you know?
There we go. But it's on you, man.
Welcome to My Social Life, episode 50.5. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and I'm super pumped that you asked me to kind of flip the script on you as you're halfway to 100 to interview you and kind of ask how the whole journey has been from episode 1, which we started in your last apartment.
Yeah.
To now episode 50. You've gone through so much change. So I kind of right off the bat just wanted to see what you think like that feeling is, what it encompasses, what it means to you kind of coming that far.
Well, it's cool that like I was trying to figure it out because when I was coming into episode 50, I was like, I don't want to make this a big deal. So to me, hitting 50 is just another episode. I didn't put too much into it because I was like, if I put too much into this episode, then it's going to become I'm going to overthink it. It's going to become too much. I literally didn't think about it. First guest, I was like, I was just like, hey, can you come on the podcast? The first guest said yes. Just happened to line up that it was 50. I didn't put any like special thing into it. I just did it like it was just business as usual. I didn't stress about my 50. So it was like nothing crazy changed once I hit that milestone.
So for you, why didn't you want to make it a milestone?
Because I feel like every 50 would just be like, I don't know why. I just didn't want to stress out about it. That was a big thing.
Yeah,
I didn't want to like put things on hold to like wait to get the perfect guest. I didn't want to be recording episodes and then like not make them my 50th because I wanted to be the perfect, like a huge guest for episode 50. I didn't want to be recording 51 before 50, if that made sense. Yeah. I didn't want to make my life difficult. I had one lined up. I was like, I'm not going to push this. I'm just going to record it. I'm going to roll with it. And it ended up being a cool episode. Sam found it was a good guy.
That's amazing. So I know from watching your podcast for so long that me and you have gone back about how to promote it, what styles to use on your Instagram page, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, like how to actually promote the whole podcast, running ads, not running ads, all this different type of stuff. So your promotional strategy has changed so much. Can you talk about like the changes that you've gone through and what you've learned from making these changes and compared to like where you're at now? Like why are you doing the promotional strategy you're doing now?
So where I'm at right now is like, I'm really in like a new space in terms of the promotional strategy. So where I'm at right now, because at the time we're recording this, episode 48 is still playing. Yeah. So technically the advertising strategy for it hasn't changed. It will change in the coming weeks. And that's something I've noticed too is I allow myself, because I'm so far in advance, I can make tweaks early and I can see things play out over time, which is kind of cool. But so right now, I think I'm starting to scale back Instagram a little bit. I've got it into a workflow now where I can get everything done in a reasonable amount of time with Instagram and all the social content there. And I found that, like, I started with subtitles, I stopped doing subtitles because I hated doing subtitles. It wasn't fun for me. And I was like, I don't want this to become something that it's just like, okay, I got to get this done. Yeah. I want the podcast to always be something fresh, something fun for me to do. And subtitles wasn't that. So I stopped doing subtitles and I didn't notice a dramatic difference when it came to Instagram. I also know Instagram is crushing engagement right now. That's on the decline. I'm not making that an excuse. It's just something I'm aware of. But at the end of the day, content will trump all. If it's good content, the algorithm will only do so much to it. Yeah. But Instagram wasn't doing it for me thus far. I'm still going to keep doing it. I don't want to stop doing Instagram. But at the end of the day, with an hour and a half, 2-hour podcast in some cases, a 45-second clip doesn't really show you what you're getting out of that. I don't think I get as much. I do get some conversion over Instagram. And what I will give Instagram credit for is it's the most culturally relevant platform. Like everyone's on Instagram. everyone uses Instagram. So I use Instagram right now more so for networking and finding guests. That's the best way to do it.
Cool.
And I still have that content because I don't want to just cut the content off and try and bring people on. They're gonna be like, you haven't posted in 3 weeks. What do you mean? So I'm gonna keep the content coming, but I use that as like a way to network with people. And like, because everyone uses it, so I'll tag people in it. Like D-Rock's shared a couple of my posts from me tagging him in it and stuff like that. But right now, what I'm gonna start doing more is putting more work into YouTube. So my YouTube sucks. Like it's like the same thumbnails for every video, pretty much just change up like the person that's in it basically. I've had a couple videos that have gotten picked up in the algorithm. The video, like the first episode, is my most viewed still. I think that's just because it was the first one. Everyone was like, what is this? And everyone jumped to it. The second one is Parviz, the episode 22. Episode 22 is with Parviz. And that one, I don't know what happened. It was like not doing anything. And then it got picked up in the Instagram and the YouTube algorithm and it started getting views. And now it's over 500 views as well. Wow. So it's like 5 or 6 behind the first episode.
How did you title it? Did you title it around Parviz or did you title it around the topic?
I titled it around Parviz, but I think how that one got picked up is in the tags and in the title, I reference all the YouTubers and stuff that he's worked with. So I'm assuming that's what happened.
For sure.
And so now I'm trying to make YouTube a bigger strategy. And an episode that's coming up is Just Dustin. And he's a huge YouTuber, and I was talking with him about different things and the analytics. And YouTube gives you so many analytics that I could really dig into the analytics side of the podcast. You get some with Instagram. It's not the greatest, but I'm spending more time trying to make better thumbnails for all my clips and not just the full episodes. I've also changed the look of the full episode. The full episode thumbnail now is different. I had one, and then I switched. I had one that was like just the Polaroid, because the Polaroid is a big staple of the podcast. And then I switched it to this cool one, like, I would cut the guest out and then I would put like a smoky background behind them with a full photo behind them. And I dropped that one. That change will be coming soon. And now I cut the guest out still, but I blow them up bigger than they have been. So it's almost just like a crop shot of just like almost like their torso up. Yeah. I make it a vibrant background color. I put their name. I have the same font that I've used for the podcast from the beginning. It's like the Sharpie looking font. I'll write their name in that one because once that font gets too small, it's kind of tough to read. Once it's blown up and big, no problem. Yeah. So I have their name written across the whole thumbnail. And then because of how I crop it, there's still like half a screen, half a thumbnail. Yeah. So I'll put like some key points about who they are.
Very cool.
And then I highlight the middle one. So I've just changed that. So I don't know how that's going to work yet. I'm hoping it'll do better. I've also started spending time recently. I had a guest, again, coming up in probably 6 weeks from the time people are listening to this. Her name's Red Romina, and she told me to check out this guy named Roberto Blake, who I was aware of, but I never watched too much of. And he does he's hundreds of videos on like YouTube growth and what YouTube's looking for. So he's a playlist called like How to Grow as a Small YouTuber. And it's 75 videos long, but some of them are like 3 hours long. So It's like a full course, and so it's like education I don't have to pay for. Yeah. So I'm taking the time now to sit down, watch these videos whenever I have some time. Whether I have 10 minutes here, I can double speed it so I can get through them a bit quicker. And while the video is running, I split screen my laptop and I have the video of him playing on one side, and I'll have my notes, and I'll be writing notes down as he's talking. Different bullet points, different things. Okay, YouTube doesn't care as much about views now. They're more into view duration. Mm-hmm. So like if you have a video that's 100,000 views, that's 1 minute long, or if you have a video with 10,000 views with the average view duration of 20 minutes, YouTube's going to favor yours. You might have 1/10 of the views, but you're holding people on that platform longer by having a longer view duration. So that's just something I'm more cognizant of now. Like, I'm just learning things about YouTube and actually taking the time to notice and make those tweaks to my strategy that I wasn't beforehand. So with the promo strategy as a whole, putting more effort into YouTube, because Instagram really hasn't been working too much. It's done a little bit for exposure. I found what's worked the best is when I reach out to random people. I never ask them to subscribe to my podcast. I'll just be like, hey, I saw this photo. I like this photo on your profile. That's it. And then I bounce. And sometimes we go back and forth. We have a dialogue. When people ask why, I just am pushing positivity. And if they listen to the podcast as a result of that, cool. If not, whatever. Like, it honestly puts me in a better mood just to sit down and talk to people on Instagram.
100%.
But overall, what's worked best for the podcast is obviously when whoever the guest is promotes it.
For sure.
Like, that's a big one I've noticed. Like, just looking at the most downloaded episodes of all time, I think a lot of Mommy Shorts is number one. And she did that awesome dedicated post. I don't remember, it was the photo we took in her living room, and she did like a whole paragraph. That's my most downloaded. Joey Kidney.
How many downloads?
I don't know if I want to say.
Oh, okay. Couple million? Okay.
I think just with that, I think people think the podcast is way bigger than it is.
It's massive.
I think people think it's.
I think you think it's way smaller than it is.
No, I'll show you later. I think people think it's bigger than it is. But so that she did the whole dedicated post in her feed. Yeah. And like there was a substantial, like her episode was doing like, okay. She posted it, boom, I had my best day of the podcast I've ever had.
Wow.
From all her people coming over to watch it. Joey Kidney, I think is this. Yeah, Joey Kidney's second right now, and he posted on his YouTube about it. I think he plugged it in his podcast. I could be wrong. He posted on his Instagram story a couple times, and then so he's the second most, and then I think third most is Geraldine's Closet. She's got a dedicated following. So when that episode came out, tons of downloads for that one. So in terms of the promotional strategy, definitely getting people to repost it is awesome. And that leads to the most.
And she's not someone that talks a lot. You know, so she does her thing, whereas like Joey and Mommy Shorts are people that are out there talking, expressing their thoughts all the time. Where she, for her business, it's not necessarily her talking. So I think a lot of people are fascinated to hear what her actual personality was like. Yeah,
100%. So, and I think like when it comes to what works best, it's obviously a genuine promotion from somebody that's like from a genuine promotion from the guest of the podcast. People share it on their Instagram stories all the time, and I find that really doesn't work. Especially like sometimes all people will do is like, and I don't care how people promote it. Like I just appreciate them coming on, taking that time. I have zero expectation of how they promote it. This is just what I found in terms of getting the downloads. When they promote it as like, sometimes they'll just share my post, their story, and call it a day.
Yeah,
that's fine. Like I would never make you post anything, but that really doesn't work. And I thought like when I started the podcast, I was like, I'm going to be interviewing like influencers, which also a lot of people don't like that word. Over the time doing this podcast, I've come to terms with that word. But I was like, I'm going to be interviewing influencers, and they're just going to promote it, and this podcast is going to be huge, right? Like 10,000 people are going to see it, then 20,000, like just all the size of following I was going to have, and it wasn't that. And I think I wasn't like didn't rattle me too much, but it was definitely just a slower progression than I was expecting it to be. But you asked me one question, I've gone on a very long tangent about promotional strategies. Right now, like I said, a genuine post from the guest trumps everything that I've done. Promoting on Instagram hasn't really done it for me. I'm going to try and switch up YouTube and see how that goes. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, I think for you as well, like if you don't want to spend that much on ads, YouTube is the place where you're going to get the most organic growth, because it's the second biggest search engine in the world. And there is advertising space on there, but it's very minimal. And that's why you see so many YouTubers becoming a thing. You don't see really Instagrammers or Facebookers, because it's a lot of pay to play and just like trying to sell stuff and this type of stuff. But on YouTube, it's an actual content play where people almost treat it like a television network, and they're putting out their shows every day and like something like that. So I think that's a good move for you.
And with that one, pay to play too, like I don't do Facebook anymore. I just found like it wasn't.
So you don't think that it's just, if you're posting it on Instagram, like just double post it on Facebook?
I thought about doing that, and I could do that, I guess. I just haven't yet. I recently started, because Instagram opened up, like you can schedule now using the Facebook Creator Studio on Instagram. So I started doing that, but then they changed it. So you used to be able to schedule as long as you want. And then they changed it to you can only schedule within the week. So all my posts are scheduled, but I can't. So I have to actually go and now manually publish all of mine, because once they made that change, none of my posts were firing. So I have to go to manually publish them all. So I guess I could try and do that as well, but then all my hashtags are in there, and it doesn't play with how Facebook's content looks. Like it's not contextualized to Facebook.
Makes sense.
And like just with Facebook right now, and I know they can make some changes, but like a guest I was talking to said they have like, I think it's 25,000 YouTube subscribers, almost 70,000 subscribers on YouTube. Not even close. YouTube is much better to post on, even though they have almost 1/3 of the following. Just because the organic reach on Facebook is so bad that it's almost like not even worth it at this point.
Yeah. Just one thing I think about though is like things change every day, right? And Facebook and Instagram are companies that at the end of the day, they sell your attention. So if the attention graph's going in a bad spot, and all of a sudden they decide to flip it, crank organic up again, it'd be amazing to have a base there. Because one thing I think people forget is like, when you start putting out content, that's great. But if people can't click and go to your profile and you have a hub of content you've posted previously, it's hard for people to become a fan. It's like if you make music and you have 3 songs out, it's hard for people to become a fan versus if you have 30 songs out when they go to your profile, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think about, but I think currently YouTube will be the play for organic search. So one thing I wanted to touch on as well is your interview style, your voice, your intros. These are all things that like I've noticed since we went on our trip to New York. I kind of watched you progress, but I know that people are commenting on them a lot and saying that they either love them or they've seen the progression as well. So what do you think about these things, and what do people always tell you about your voice, your intros, and your interview style?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of comments about my intro from time to time, especially because like not this morning, but more often than not, I hit my intro and my outro in one take. and then we just jump into the podcast. So usually like people, like I've gotten comments like, can you just follow me around and read that intro every time I do? Like I go into a room or like somewhere, like I did my outro and like I did the whole thing. And like after we wrapped it up, she's like, you should, like my mouth is open. Like right now, like I can't believe you did that whole outro without like stumbling.
Yeah.
And like the outro now, like it's pretty like, I've just done it so many times now. It's just almost like a reflex. Once I get into my intro, I know I'm fine.
Yeah,
It's just a reflex. In terms of my voice, like I don't know where that started, how that happened. Like where, like I go back and I listen to the first podcast episode, and my voice isn't quite the same.
Yeah.
Like I figured out like what my podcast voice is.
That's it. Yeah.
And like I talk, I don't know how to explain. I talk like the back of my throat. I don't talk like when I talk out of my mouth, but I talk out of the back of my throat when I'm doing a podcast.
Yeah.
And that kind of like when I trail off sometimes, like it almost like crackles a little bit. I don't know where or how I found my podcast voice, but it's definitely different from my regular voice. And like sometimes I don't like turn it off. Like I recorded a takeaways episode, which is the one where I sit down by myself. And then I sent a voice memo to someone and I listened back and I texted them after and I was like, yeah, sorry, that sounded super professional. Like I just finished recording a podcast. Like sometimes it doesn't.
In that zone.
Yeah. So, but yeah, people like it. People like the intros. They like the flow of it, especially like it catch people off guard when I do it in one take and like I'll list it all off. And like most of the time it is one take. Like this morning I stumbled and that threw me off a little bit. It was also 7:30 in the morning. I've never done one that early, but yeah, I don't know where the voice came from. People seem to like it. As far back as I can remember, Joey Kidney is the first person that might have complimented it, I think.
Yeah.
Like I literally did my intro and he just looked at me and went, I like your podcast voice. He's like, we all have one, but he's like, but I like yours.
But I remember Geraldine saying that.
Yeah, but Geraldine was after Joey.
Was she?
Yeah, Joey I recorded right before we left.
Before we went? Okay.
Yeah. So Joey was the first one that I can remember saying it. Someone else might have beforehand. I can't fully remember. But we got a couple compliments. Like Geraldine, I think Lindsay said something. Brandon asked both of us if we wanted, like, whoever interested in speaking because we have the voice for it. So like, I remember in New York, it came up quite a bit. Like, and that's where I was really like, okay, I think I'm onto something in terms of like how I do my voice. And in terms of like the interview style, I think it's definitely gotten a lot better over time. Like, especially in person, I don't rely on the notes as much anymore. Sometimes when I'm doing the remote ones, I use the notes a little bit heavier. But that's also because it's harder. It's like not as natural a conversation when I'm recording.
That's what I was going to say. Like when you're doing a remote one, is it more difficult? Is there a different vibe? Is there a different strategy you take? Mm-hmm. Like especially the vibe, like is it hard to get into a rhythm with someone through a computer versus like the actual energy of two people in a room together?
A little bit, yeah. And there's more back and forth when I have someone in the apartment too, because like we talk beforehand. There's like pre-podcast dialogue. Usually with like because where I record now with my remote recordings, like I don't use Skype. I use this program called Zencaster, which was recommended to me by Seth Feingersh, who did Gary's podcast. And it's great, but there's no video. So that makes the vibe even harder to get because you can't see the other person. But it's great because it records both sides of the conversation. So like I literally had one day my Wi-Fi cut in the middle of a podcast and it records in two separate audio tracks. So when I'm listening to it back, you can hear me going, I think I lost you, like 1 second. And then because she couldn't tell because my Wi-Fi was cut, she couldn't get my connection, it was still recording on both ends. And when I listen back to it, when I'm doing my whole like freak out because it's not going, she's just still answering the question.
No, she never heard you.
She never heard me because the connection was gone.
Right.
And it recorded on both sides. And then I just removed my part of the audio. Yeah. Of her, I'm like, I lost you. Yeah. And because by the time I got my Wi-Fi back, I sat down. She was finishing the answer to the question. So it's like, she could tell because like my follow-up question was a little bit off. Yeah. But she asked because I pointed it out after, and it was just so it's great because it records both sides, and I don't have the greatest Wi-Fi. Yeah. So you start using that, and because the connection's great too. Like if you use wired Apple headphones, fine. Like you're great. It doesn't work with wireless headphones though. Interesting. Which is an issue. Yeah. Like it works, but the sound is awful.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if it's wired Apple headphones, it's clean quality, like it's perfect, and I export it, and I don't even have to touch any of the audio up. Like that's just great. But back to your question about the vibe, it's definitely different. But usually, like my thing is, I try to hit them with something pretty early on that they won't think I'll know. I actually, speaking of that, this is totally separate, but I wanted to tell you this.
Tell me it.
Episode 50, so it's coming up, episode 54. I asked the guy in the intro, his old username was Justice Good, Now he's since switched it to his full name.
Yeah.
But in the intro, I'm like, we're going to figure out if he grew to this size on YouTube by accident or if he's just this good. And then I dropped another thing that he was like, I have no idea how you figured that one out.
Yeah.
And he literally goes, you're like Nardwar.
And remember?
Yeah, you told me about Nardwar. And I was just like, that's super cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I try, like, once I do that, like, people kind of, like, once they realize, like, I've actually done the research, when I'm asking them questions, they really open up on the audio. I almost enjoy doing the audio ones more now.
Yeah.
Like, the in-person ones are great, but when I do the audio one, it's just so much easier for me to set up. It's so quicker. I can have my notes there so they never forget anything.
Yeah.
So it's like, I almost enjoy it because it's easier, but it's also cool to meet people in person is just so much better.
So what's the craziest thing that you figured out about someone before you went on the podcast with them? And then, you got to bring it up and see their reaction. How did they react to it?
I think, I'm trying to think. Lindsay was kind of thrown off when I figured out that she ran this, like, Twitter account that had her name not associated with any way, shape, or form. This other guy, it was like these drawings he did of a kid that looked like Fortnite characters that I asked him about. That was the one where he's like, you're like Nardwar. But a lot of things is like, I guess I'm good at research.
Yeah.
But it's not like, I don't go to the Nardwar extent of like,
calling their
call,
third grade
yeah,
teacher.
Exactly. Like, like the most I'll do is I'll message someone that knows them that I have a mutual connection with.
Oh,
hey,
okay.
like I know you know this person.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any stories about them that you think I should ask them about? Things they wouldn't expect me to know.
Yeah.
And like I did one that's coming up in a couple weeks, and she knows Little Miss Ottawa, who's the episode coming out in 2 weeks from now, and she knew Little Miss Ottawa, but she lives in Atlanta. Like, they just happen to be on the same press tour together. And I asked her in the podcast, like, I thought I was really going to get her with this question. And sometimes I think I ask people things and it doesn't click into them that like, you should
know it. Yeah.
Like, I asked her about, I was like, do you have any crazy travel stories? Like when you were in Quebec and you fell off a paddleboard in freezing cold water? And she told the whole story. And I was like, she like didn't skip a beat.
So it didn't phase her.
But I was like, maybe she just didn't realize that. Like, how did I know that?
Yeah.
So there's some things where I'm like, I think I'm going to get them.
Or maybe she put out a piece of content about it and you had no idea that she
maybe. But like, in terms of, I already forgot what we were talking about. Oh, was you asking me
catching people off guard and the reaction. Like,
yeah. Those like the big ones probably was the guy where he called me Nardwar. I was like, that's pretty cool. Lindsay, where she started. My favorite is where they start answering and they go, wait, how did you know that?
Yeah.
And
it clicks.
And I used to tell them now, but now I just tell them I forget where I found it. Sometimes I actually do, but sometimes it's like, Spotify has an ability now where you can search up podcasts by title.
Yeah.
Not by like podcast, I like by episode title.
Yeah.
So all my guests now, I search up their name and I download every single podcast they've been on.
You figure it out, eh?
And I can just listen to it when I'm walking to work. I'm at the gym and I just have a notepad that I write everything down.
How long does it take you to do research typically?
It depends if you factor in the podcasts. A long time.
Yeah.
But I don't, because like I listen to podcasts anyway, so I'm just...
What would you just say if you had to put a time on it? Average?
2-3 hours.
Wow, that's a lot.
So if you made me, I could do it in an hour.
Yeah.
If I really had to trim it down, I could probably do it in 30 minutes.
Very cool.
If I really had to, but it will just depend on the extent of how deep I go and what my notes look like.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay,
so for those of you who don't know, me and Jacob traveled to New York City for his 15th episode celebration.
Yeah.
Something like that, because I remember when he started the podcast, we'd been talking about it for a long time before he started it, and he told me like when his kind of like goal was to get to New York and film a bunch of bigger people in New York. Mm-hmm. And he kind of made a goal for himself. If he gets to 15 episodes, then he'll pay what it takes to get there and kind of follow that dream that he wanted to do. So he did it. He followed through with it. I joined him on the trip. So we did 10 podcasts in 5 days, and I got to listen to you for such like a short period of time. And I truly got to see the progression that we were talking about. Like, it was crazy. Like doing two in a day, you could kind of like, you really got kind of get used to it. But then I guess like not even realizing it, I would hear it and I'd be like, oh my God, like you're getting good. Like boom, boom, boom. You're not stuttering. You're very clear. Your questions are phenomenal. You're catching them off guard. Like you're really crushing it. So talk about that trip to New York and like what it meant to you.
New York was so cool.
Yeah.
It was like...
And how good your travel buddy was.
Travel buddy was awesome. So clutch. You're running the camera, doing the angles. Was great.
Yeah, I did my part.
But New York was awesome. Like, I don't think it could have gone any better.
Yeah.
Like, because it could have, like, we were talking, like, it could have been as good as it was, or it could have been really, really bad.
For sure, because we just messaged people over DM and tried to set up these meetings in New York City. Mm-hmm. And then when we show up there, like, what are the odds that these people are going to follow through, you know, with hundreds of thousands of followers and all this, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was definitely the risk.
Yeah, but it was just, like, looking back on it now, like, it's crazy. Like, it was maybe 6 months ago now, and
Yeah,
it feels
February,
it feels like it's been way longer. Like it feels like we haven't been there forever, and like but just like that, like it just in terms of what it meant to me, like it's kind of a culmination of why I did it, right? Like at the time, I was like I set once I hit 15, I told myself I could go. By the time we got there, I'd recorded 21, but it was just kind of like the
animal.
It's just like the culmination of like everything that the podcast was. Like the podcast wasn't huge at the time, still isn't, but like one thing I always tell people is it's the people I get to meet from the podcast and all these connections I'm making is equally as valuable as the downloads.
100%.
Obviously the downloads are great, but like because of the podcast, it was like validating everything I was doing. Like because of the podcast, we got to meet 10 cool people. We got inside VaynerMedia. We got inside Gary's office. I tried burritos for the first time.
Yeah, 3 times in a row.
3 times. So good. But yeah, it was just kind of like validating everything I was working towards and like really proving like this is something that could become something.
Yeah.
I think like it was just cool to be able to just everything that we were able to accomplish in 5 days. Just if I could do that over the course of a couple of years, like how far could this go?
100%. And so out of all those moments, like without thinking about it too long, like what's the first few that come to mind that are just standout moments, favorite moments, things that you'll like never forget?
Obviously the 2 VaynerMedia ones come to mind. The one where first it was just getting into Vayner with Caleb was really cool.
Yeah.
But the one that sticks me more so from Caleb is after the interview when we were, you know, exactly what I'm talking about. We come down the elevator with Caleb and he says, "Hey guys, thank you. I really appreciate it."
Yeah.
Like, it means a lot to me. Like, I can't believe you reached out to me. This is super cool. And we walked away and he called back and he was like, "No guys, like I'm serious." Like, and he like put his hands together like a prayer and he was like, "Thank you."
That's crazy that you remember that.
Yeah.
That's how you know like it was a truly like a moment that you'll never forget. If you can reenact what he was doing.
Yeah.
Like,
and I was like, that's just like, that's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
this is such a big deal for me that you were willing to take 30 minutes out of your day to do an interview with me.
Yeah.
Like that was so cool. And for him to think it was equally as like a big deal that we were willing to talk to him was crazy. And there was also just actually another one too, was Caleb. We were talking about people that were like, "How did you know that?" It was like literally because Caleb, I had all this research, but then at the day of, he's like, "I only have half an hour now," like, cause he got tickets to a Knicks game. And so as I was transitioning, I was like, we're just going to skip over, like, and I name dropped his company that he had right when he started doing video. And his face was just like, whoo, like, shit, like, oh, okay, like, you actually know what you're talking about. But so that one stands out. Obviously, Brandon Hatcher, just that whole day is going to stand out to me. We get there, 45-minute tour of the whole office. He takes us around.
VaynerMedia,
Then we go into the boardroom. Hour and 45-minute podcast. Then we probably talked for another hour, just the 3 of us just shooting the shit after that podcast. Yeah. And then as we're leaving, he's like, "Do you guys want to go into Gary's office?" Obviously. And then we go, he shows us this cool poster that his girlfriend bought him. And then we went into Gary's office, got some photos.
Crazy. That moment for me personally was just so surreal that I don't even really remember it.
Yeah.
Like I remember being in there and the whole time just thinking, remember this, because it's like you're only here for a couple minutes and like this is a huge thing for me because you know how much I love Gary. And looking back, I can't even really remember it because I was just in shock that it was real life.
Yeah, now that photo, I always show people that whenever I find someone like Gary, I'm like, I have to show you a photo, it's going to blow your mind. Yeah. And I'll show them, but like I'll watch his stuff now and I'll be like watching a Daily View or something and then halfway through, I'll be like, oh yeah, I sat right
in that
there.
Chair. And there's Gary, there's Tony Robbins or something. Yeah. You'll be like, man, I was right there. Like,
so that was really cool. Joey Kidney was obviously cool. Just like that was the first like big YouTuber I ever had on the podcast. This is the 50th episode Reflection, so I don't want to talk too much about what I got coming up. Like there's a moment coming up that was crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give that one too much away.
So when you got back from New York, what was the mindset? What was the vibe? A lot of times when people go on a trip like that, when they get back, they're so fired up to keep going. They're super inspired. Like, did you experience any of that? What did you feel when you got back?
I actually had like the opposite.
Interesting. Okay.
I had like a lull when I came back from New York.
I also felt like you accomplished what you wanted to.
No, it wasn't it. I had 10 episodes done, so I had 10 episodes to edit. So one, I was just doing that. I wasn't interviewing people anymore.
Yeah.
Like I was spending so much time.
Is that your favorite part?
What, interviewing people?
Of the whole podcast process?
Oh yeah, I think editing is probably my least favorite. I don't hate it though.
For sure.
But the research is like once it gets to a point, I don't like it anymore. If I hit like the 3-hour mark, I'm kind of like, okay, like I'm done with this. But the beginning of the research where I'm like finding all these things, like that's fun for
Inspector Jacob.
But the interview is good. I like doing the interview. Yeah. That's my favorite part. But so I wasn't interviewing people, I was just editing. And I was like, so I was reaching out to people, and then the first couple ones I did too this was when I was still trying to figure out that good workflow for remote recordings, and there were some issues with some of them, and I was like fuck.
Yeah.
And then it just like, I'm in Ottawa now. I'm not in New York. I'm not recording 2-3 podcasts a day. I'm not in VaynerMedia 2 out of the last we were there 2 days in a row. We were in VaynerMedia. Like, it just wasn't as grand anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, this is the reality. You're not going to be in New York every single day doing this. Like, New York was so cool and so successful. We got so much accomplished that coming back, I was like the wind was out of my sails a little bit, because I was like, it's just not, like, I'm not interviewing people. The connections aren't, like, my interviews aren't going as great. I'm just editing now. Like, it's just, I just almost had a lull.
So then if you went into a lull, I'm assuming you're no longer in that lull.
Yeah.
What kind of got you out of it? Was it doing more interviews?
Yeah, I just kept doing it. I was like, I know I can't quit. Like,
I could tell, because clearly that's your passion. So that kind of made sense to me, that's what would have pulled you out of it.
And there will still be moments or like days where I'm like, why am I still doing this?
Yeah.
Like, why? Like, it's not growing. Like, there's like some times where it's like, I don't see growth, and it's kind of stagnant almost.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do I still do this? Why? Like, what? Like, I lose the motivation for like a day or two.
Yeah.
But what was really cool is Partha Unava, who was episode 47. He said that like motivation doesn't last. Like, he's the first person I ever put in this perspective, and I really like that one. The way he explained it is because I started asking a question, like my Q&A question at the end. Those have changed quite a bit. I filter through some questions now for that one. But I've started asking, like, when your alarm goes off in the morning, what motivates you to get out of bed? Like, what motivates you to go out there and crush it today? And he goes, honestly, man, like, I don't think motivation lasts. Like, I'm not like motivated in the morning. He's like, motivation doesn't last. Like, you'll have that feeling, and it'll be like a couple days where you're motivated and you want to crush it. Mm-hmm. But what you need to do in that 2-3 day time frame is set up systems in place so that when that motivation subsides, when you're not coming home from that conference where you saw Gary speak and you're fired up now, when that motivation subsides, what have you set in place that's going to allow you to continue working and progressing even once it's gone? So with me, like, I just have a workflow with the editing now that even like when I was in that state, like, I know I just got to keep going, keep putting episodes out. And two, with that, like, with all the editing, I was just like, it's all the New York ones though. So these are ones I want people to hear. So I can't just stop editing. Like, I went to New York, I interviewed like Brandon Hatcher. I can't just not edit it and never let anyone hear it. Like, I want people to hear it. That's why I went. So even though like everything I was doing after that, like, those are still great episodes. And I think one of the ones I recorded after New York, the first one I recorded, Hungry Blonde, that's like top 5 or 6 I've ever done. So I just think, there was a lull in just like my motivation, but I just kept pushing. And then that's just how I got out of it, just by keep working.
So when you're doing your research, do you have like a certain structure that you start with? How do you find these juicy questions? Like, do you go to certain sites? Do you start with this and then go to that? Or is it random? Like, how do you do that?
So it used to be kind of random.
Yeah.
It used to be like I had no flow. I would like write it all down. And what I've recently started doing is I've started typing it on the computer. And so I've kind of gone out of being strict with it. Like, I used to set timelines, like I have 1 hour. Once I'm done 1 hour, I can't research anymore. Like, it's 1 hour of me writing things down. Yeah. And so now how it will go is I'll download some podcasts. If there's time to listen to all the podcasts, I'll download all the podcasts they've been on. Some people it's none. Some people it's 1 or 2. Some people it's like 6, which is great. Yeah. And so the podcast is probably where I get the best questions, because it's an hour and people don't realize what they're saying sometimes. Yeah. So like some of the questions where I've blown people's mind, they're like, how did you find that?
Because they dropped a little thing and
said it.
Got it.
And I just want to ask you about it. So like they'll forget that they said it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I get some questions that blow people's mind. And then other than that, I do a deep dive on the internet. Yeah. Just Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Google everything. Yeah. Any articles that they've been in, anything that they've written. I like read everything. And then so I'll write down all the main points. That's my big thing. And then once that's done, I just go and I write all the sub points to everything, and that leads to 2-3 pages worth of notes, and then I just go from there. So that's kind of, but it never used to be that structured.
Do you write out formal questions, or do you just bullet point a thought and kind of go with the flow of the conversation and insert it?
Sometimes I'll bullet point, like if I know like a specific question, don't forget this, I'll write it down. Okay. But sometimes it'll be like, I guess some of it's quite a bit of questions. Okay. But it's not like they'll answer that and then I'm like, on to the next question. Yeah. Like I'll just kind of like wherever the flow of the podcast is, like today or the one I was recording this morning, we jumped ahead a little bit and then we came back and I got all the questions that we skipped, but just because of the flow of the conversation, I'm not like bound to the order of the questions.
For sure. So. Yeah. Very cool. So that's how you do your research on the guests. How do you actually find the guests? I know you do a little bit of referrals, but other than those, like, what would you say the amount of your guests is from referrals, like percentage wise, like 20% of referrals, or like do you actively look on Instagram, Facebook, and stuff, or do you let them come to you, or like how does it kind of work?
So for the most part, it's just me reaching out to people.
How do you find them?
Instagram.
Do you
Instagram,
actively,
Twitter.
like search things, or how do you find them?
I used to when I started.
Okay.
Especially because when I first started, I was like, I don't want to do remote ones. I want them all to be in person.
Yep.
So I went through the Ottawa Instagram location every single
ran out after about 15 episodes, and
No, I have a list of over 200 people in Ottawa
Jeez.
with over 10. Like I had like a spreadsheet and like it was all there.
yeah, I love it. Data points on them all.
Yeah, I had like how many followers they had at the time and like everything. And
You should sell that to businesses for local influencers.
yeah, I have a list on my phone too of like 50 people that just never made it to the list.
Wow.
But now, especially because I'm so far ahead, right? Like where it's August 29th right now, I think I have episodes recorded until the end of October.
Jeez.
So it's like now I don't have to be as like constantly looking.
You wait for the right ones.
I don't wait. Well, kind of. Like I don't message as many people probably as I used to. Now I ask, like you said, the referrals thing. That's something I've recently started making sure I do. I ask people if there's anyone you know, let me know. Like I'm always looking, and I always say if it's someone that you think would be good for the podcast and I would want to come on.
Right,
like,
because it's almost a double-edged sword in the sense like they're probably a good guest in terms of like quality, but you can also probably get them through this person.
Yeah, and I never want to ask people like specifically for someone. Like I know that you know people. Like I can see that we follow the same person, that they follow you back. But I'm never gonna be like, hey, I know you know this person. Can you ask them? Like,
Why? Why wouldn't you do that?
I just don't want to put them in that position, and I never want someone to feel like I interviewed them just to try and get to someone else. You know what I mean?
Interesting, because I think if you frame it correctly, then it's not. You could just be like, look, I noticed that so and so follows you. I'm like a huge fan. If you feel comfortable, I'd love to get them on my podcast. If you don't, totally cool. Like, I just wanted to shoot my shot now that I have it. Or,
Yeah.
You know?
Usually what I do with that, because I try and keep a connection with the people I have on my podcast. So I'll always just say, if there's anyone you know, let me know. Like I'm always looking.
Yeah.
And then what I do though, is if I do get to a point where I do reach out to that person that they know, I send them a message. Hey, by the way, I saw you know this person. I just sent them a message asking them to come on the podcast. Can you put in a good word? Like you've been on the show, to be like, hey, I was on the show as well. Which with that in mind, I was told, and this was crazy for me, like this blew my mind. I had to guess something like, yeah, you have a pretty good reputation around the Vayner office.
Yeah, for sure, man.
And I was like, that's cool. Just because like
you've interviewed so many of them.
I know. I just joked that I should change the name of the podcast to My Vayner Life at this point.
Like, that's so funny.
Literally, I've interviewed Brandon Hatcher, Caleb Ralston, Daniel Ossie, Max Brown, Seth Feingersh, and I've got another one.
I mean, they probably know you as the guy who interviews all the Vayner employees.
Probably.
Right?
I've got another one coming up too with another one that was a recommendation. It was like I asked someone like, "Hey, do you know anybody else?" He's like, "Yeah, you should interview Gary's other videographer, like this guy," and then send me his info.
100%.
So
I love that. So it's funny. This transitions perfectly. How often does that happen to you, where like you're talking about something and it transitions perfectly to the next question?
all the time.
All the time. Okay. So I was thinking that probably happens to you as well. So aside from these amazing podcast episodes, talk about the connections that you're making with these guests and what that has done for you, what opportunities that's led to you.
I mean, it hasn't led me to any like crazy opportunities.
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, like in terms of connections, like it's just people that I don't know how to explain it. Like for the most part, where connections have benefited me the most is it leads to more connections. Like it leads to more people I can interview. Like it's never led to me getting a brand deal or anything. Like I had one guy who was willing to do it, but my podcast isn't in a spot now where I can monetize it. Where I could, like the way he pitched it to me, I could have, but I didn't want to just monetize it for the sake of monetizing it. I will, if it gets to that point, I will monetize the podcast. Obviously, like if it can be my job, that'd be awesome, or at least a main source of my income. That'd be great. I'm not there yet, and I don't want to monetize it just for the sake of monetizing it.
Smart.
But the connections have, just led to more connections. The connections, like in terms of the people I had on it, adds a little credibility to what I'm doing. I added it up yesterday. The total following of all of my guests is over 7 million now, which is crazy.
That's crazy. That's a sick stat.
That's a sick stat. I think that right now, like in terms of like the 50 episode mark, I think it's at like 3.5. So I've got some big guests coming up. Like I think it was 3 guests equal over 4 million.
Wow.
Like back to back to back.
Yeah.
But one of them's 3.2 million, so that helps.
So those 3 guests, you don't have to name them. How did you get them? Cold DM or connection or what?
2 were connections. One of them wasn't a podcast guest connection. It was a friend of mine.
So all 3 connections?
Except for the one. The one was someone I messaged early on.
Yeah.
A YouTuber that pretty much taught me everything that I know about Photoshop, video editing. Like his name's Justin Odisho. And I messaged him early on about the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I think it was about New York. And I was like, hey, if you happen to be in New York from this time to this time, I'm going to be there. And I'd love to have you on the show. And what I do too is I look, when I want to ask somebody, I'll go to all of their social profiles because he has like just for example, some people will have like 100,000 on Instagram. Maybe they'll have like 200,000 on YouTube, and I go to their Twitter and they have 7,000 followers.
Yeah.
If I send them a DM there, they probably don't get as many.
Yeah. And
so there's a higher likelihood they're going to answer. But so he has over 700,000 YouTube subs. He has like 30,000, 38,000 Instagram followers.
Right.
So I send him a message there. And
that's a sick tactic.
And I was like, if there's ever anybody, like, if you're in New York at this time, I'd love to have on the show. He's like, no. I was like, okay, well, no. This is the time where I was like, I don't really want to do remote ones. Like, I'd started doing it, and both of them hadn't gone very well.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's fair, man. If you're ever in Ottawa, let me know.
Yeah.
And I followed up with him recently because I was like, I've DM'd him, he's responded, so he gets a notification now. It's not a request.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, man, like, love following up. Like, we talked about it. Love to have you on the show. And he was like, yeah, man, for sure. Like, I don't know if I don't have any plans to be in Ottawa. I was like, don't worry, dude, I have a workflow now. So that's how that one. The other two, one was a friend of mine who introduced me to this YouTuber. And another one was, I interviewed someone, asked for if they know anybody, who referred me to someone who I interviewed, who I then asked, and who then referred me to this third person.
I need a chart.
Yeah, it's crazy. So,
that's cool.
But yeah, so just the most thing with the connections, it leads to introductions to more people, and it almost adds like a sense of validity to what I'm doing. I'm not just interviewing random people. Like, these are all the people I'm interviewing. This is where they work. This is what 100%. They do.
So aside from me pushing you to do this, what made you stick with remote ones? Because you said the first ones didn't go well. Mm-hmm. After those ones didn't go well, what made you continue pushing to figure out the workflow and nail it?
I just knew it it opens up who I can have on the podcast by so much. Like when it's just in Ottawa, it's just in Ottawa. It's either people that are here or it's people that are passing through, which I've messaged a couple people that are passing through. I think I've had one person that was passing through, and actually they reached out to me. I didn't even reach out to them. That was the Fluke guy. His agency reached out to me. It was like my 9th episode, and it blew my mind. But for the most part, like, it just opens up the door to so many more people. And the big push too with it was after New York, there were some people that we'd messaged that fell through, but they're like, I still want to be on. Can we do it over Skype? And I was like, well, I'm not going to tell you no, obviously. So like, I need to figure it out. And then it was just when I was, I went then. So like, it was doing it. It was leading to more guests. And then once especially once Seth Fingers told me, like, you check out Zencaster. And at first I was hesitant because I was like, if I don't have a video, I don't have clips. I've since figured out a way. I've not taught myself, but I found a template for Adobe After Effects, which I've never used. And I taught myself how I can make this template work. So I have a workflow now where I have a visual behind the audio now when it's just like that. So once I have this workflow down too, now I've been like cranking out, like, my girlfriend made a comment to me the other day. She's like, you're doing so many more like remotely now as opposed to in person. I'm like, well, I can reach out to so many more people. It's easier. Like when I have someone come for the podcast, I'm not complaining about it. We'll chat for like 20, 30 minutes beforehand. Then we'll record, then we'll hang out, we'll chat after a little bit. So it just adds exponentially. It just increases how much time it takes. Whereas with the remote, when I log on, I'm like, hey, what's going on? We'll go back and forth for a minute. I'll ask if they have any questions. We'll dive into it. We'll kind of wrap up.
Got it.
Sometimes I'll like chat with them longer. Like Digital Jap, I think I chatted with for like 30, 40 minutes after we wrapped up. Again, a couple other people I've just talked to after for a little while. I think Daniel Austin.
Are there a lot of guests that were remote that you keep a relationship with after?
Oh, yeah. Like, I do my best, especially like that's another thing I use Instagram for, is with everybody on it, everybody posting all the time, especially on stories. I do my best to just like reply to people like genuinely, right? Like, I'll comment on people's photos now, I'll like their photos. I try to just not keep myself top of mind, but I don't want to interview them and then just that was it. Like, I try to keep that connection. Like, I don't want, like, I met you through this podcast, but I don't want our relationship to end at this podcast. I want to keep you as a contact. And so I just do my best, like, to keep in contact with people. Like, I message different people from time to time, like Caleb, Brandon Hatcher will message me, but he usually messages me and I like reply to his stories and stuff. He'll send me a message about it. But like the other day, I think it was a couple weeks ago now, like even I posted a thing on Twitter about scheduling on Instagram because I got it before a lot of people did. And I didn't realize that. Like, I come into the office, I'm like, guys, we can schedule on Instagram now, like, check it out, look it. And then everyone goes back to their desk and like, I don't have the button to post on like from the computer. And I was like, that's really weird. And then I just was like, oh, I don't know. Like, it didn't hit me that I had early access to this until I posted a video on my LinkedIn about like, here's how you can schedule on Instagram now, like from Facebook. And I do this video and whatever. And then it was like 2 weeks later, everyone's losing their minds about how you can schedule on Instagram now. Breaking news, you can schedule on Instagram. And I was like, what? I talked about this. So I posted it on my Twitter. I was like, hey, I'm seeing a lot of people talking about this breaking news. I posted this video on my LinkedIn like a week or two ago. Here's how you can schedule on Instagram. And it's me like just sitting over there doing a selfie video. And then I flip it around and pointing at my screen like, this is how you do it. And Caleb shared it. He like retweeted it.
No way.
And he was like, yo, like check this out. Like this is how you can see it on Instagram. And then he posted on his Instagram story.
Your thing?
Yeah. He like,
No way.
I don't remember what the visual was, but he goes, at the Jacob Kelly has the secret to post to scheduling on Instagram. DM him to learn how. And then a creator I really, really like.
Yeah.
I really like his style. Like aesthetically, his like visuals are really good. He worked for Gary. I don't know if you know Babin.
Yep.
Babin messaged me. He's like, how do you do this?
No way.
I think that's cool. So
did you lose your mind?
no, see, that's another thing too. Like in terms of losing my mind, I don't really do that.
Well, I guess you are a celebrity as well. So,
but I just mean like I don't get starstruck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
would Gary throw you off?
I don't know. That's the thing. I'd want to meet Gary because like you think like when I interview Joey, people are like, "Are you gonna be cool?" Like,
yeah.
And I was like, I don't feel like that anymore. Like again, like I interviewed Just Us and he's got 3.2 million. That's coming up in a couple weeks.
Is it something that you purposely do, or is it legit natural? Like you just aren't phased.
I think it's like I think at first it was like a little forced, but now it's just like
you just see him as a human.
Yeah,
whatever.
like people are people. I like talk about that in the takeaways from time to time. It's like I just don't like when Babin DM'd me. Hallie was like, "Holy shit, that's crazy!" Because she knows like she's watched a couple of his videos.
She's
with
seen the
me.
mural you have.
But she's like, "Are you freaking out?" I'm like, "No, like it's just another dude, right?" Like, so I just don't get starstruck anymore either, which is something that's kind of cool.
Very cool.
Like, yeah, because I interviewed Just Us and people are like, "Holy shit, that's crazy!" Like,
yeah,
they're celebrities, these people, but I just don't think like that anymore.
Cool. So one thing I remember us talking about was originally when you're going to start the podcast, it was going to be very tactical, how to help people grow on social media by talking to the people that have done it, right? What I took away from my episode number 1, go check it out, was every time somebody brought it up to me, they'd always say, I never knew this. And it would always be within the first half of my podcast where I was telling my story of how I got to where I was at. And when I thought about the podcast originally, I was like, man, this first 30 minutes is great, but it's so boring. Like, it's just my story. Like, all the good marketing advice is the second half. And then, like I said, from the feedback, everyone was talking about my story and no one was talking about the marketing advice. So from your perspective, have you seen a similar thing where it's stories versus marketing tactics? What do people like? What do people comment on? How have you shifted the direction of your podcast based on it? Yeah,
so I changed my whole intro because of it.
Okay.
So the podcast intro used to be this podcast where we teach you how to grow on social media by talking to people that have actually done it. And then I changed it to this podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media.
That's crazy.
So I changed that too. And then
around what episode did you change that?
It's probably shortly after New York. Because again, with me being so far in advance, when I make a change, I'll make the change. I'll be doing it. Months. You won't hear it for like 6 weeks.
Interesting.
So New York, I'll had the original intro, and there's a couple intros or episodes after New York, I think, where I made that change.
Okay.
So it might have even been the first one after New York, I think.
Wow.
There's a chance.
So then go on about why you made that change.
I just think like you said with the feedback, people want the stories.
Yeah.
People like the stories. It's interesting, and two, the marketing advice. A lot of people, not everyone says the same thing, but a lot of it's similar.
Sure.
Post consistently, like do this, good content. Don't worry too much about this. Like in the beginning, I did this, and everyone's like, a lot of it is similar.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to make it all around this when every single episode would start to become almost the same thing. Stories. Everyone has different stories, right? So I still talk about the tactical tips from here in time to time, but we don't focus on it as heavy as we used to.
So now you're legitimately focusing on kind of who they were before social, and then the climb/rise of their social, and the stories behind it, not the actual tactics that got them there. For the most part.
For the most part, I'll still bring up some tactics and stuff, like in different things, and I try to keep it chronologically as well. So we'll start before, and we start when they started posting on YouTube, and like I'll ask, like, what are some things you did to grow back then? Like, what were you doing? And like that led to like Consumed by Carlo telling me he like literally printed off flyers and went to like popular tourist spots in Ottawa and like hung up flyers for his Instagram, and so like it leads to stories and stuff like that. So but the crazy thing is like I'll look back at some of the questions I wrote down before I ever recorded, and some of them are like story-based questions. So like I always had that intention, but it just didn't really click in my brain.
Interesting.
But yeah, so that's kind of how I've switched it. Is I focus more on the stories now, and I'm interviewing the same people I would normally. But another thing when I switched it to stories is I used to have this rule where I was like, they have to have 10,000 followers or more, because like I want to talk about how they grew. Like I'm not going to talk to someone about how they grew when they have 800 followers. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But then once I made that switch, I was like, well, I can interview people that because the stories behind the people on social media. So now whenever I tell people about it, I'm like looking for guests. I always say I'm just looking for people doing cool things in the social space.
I see social accounts all the time that are phenomenal. They're doing amazing stuff, but they're just such a niche industry that they might not be able to get up there. And they're cool with that. And their content's so good. Their page is so good. So like by putting a cap on that data-wise, I could see it holding you back from, interviewing some really interesting people.
Yeah. Like I interviewed our friend Scott Birdie.
Yeah.
A couple episodes ago. He has like 900 followers on Instagram. I guess he has almost 5,000 on LinkedIn, but only like 900 followers on Instagram. But we had an awesome conversation. We talked about TrueFan, which is a startup he works for. Yeah. And it was a good conversation. We talked a lot about social media stuff, that if I kept my rule of 100,000 or not 10,000, that conversation never would have happened.
For sure.
But I think the first person that didn't have, actually I think I broke my rule within the first 10 episodes.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Yeah.
No, I think that was definitely the play. So we've already talked about people assuming that the podcast is bigger than it is. Why do you think that is?
I just think because I talk about it all the time. People think it's like just this crazy thing. And
so you're talking about people that you actually see in real life? Or
yeah.
Or are you talking about like on the internet, people think it's bigger than it is?
I think people in my closest circle, I think people think it's bigger than it is.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it is the people I have on.
Yeah.
Like I think people like, oh, you interviewed a YouTuber. You interviewed this YouTuber. Like there's no way they'd come on your podcast if it was small.
Yeah.
But
why do you think they do?
Honestly, I don't know. Like because I straight up ask them.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I don't get asked all the time. Podcasts are hot right now. Everyone likes doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I actually I've realized recently I've been forgetting and I don't tell people I'm going to send them content anymore. Like that hasn't been a factor.
Yeah.
But I don't get as many no's and as ignored as often as I used to either. So I don't understand why.
I think it's personally, I just think it's because it's such a little commitment for them. It's an hour.
Yeah.
Out of like, you can schedule it whenever, like over the next month, just pick an hour, So for them, like if they're smart too, they'll actually see it's more upside for them with the content, with the free exposure, because then they take your content, they can distribute it and get more exposure that way. So I think if you really do think about it, there's a lot of value in it for them, no matter how big your podcast is. But I also just think for people who don't think in business terms like that, it's just such a low commitment. Like, why would you say no?
Yeah. And I think too, like, especially when I was first reaching out and I had 3 episodes, it'd be like, I don't want to do this. Like, you're just starting. Like, is this really going to be a thing?
Yeah.
But now they go back and like, this is the 50th episode, like 50th reflection episode. So there's 50 episodes, but I also do the takeaways episodes, which like doubles the volume.
Yeah.
Right? So technically I'm closing in on 100 uploads because
that's crazy.
I've uploaded, because all the takeaways episodes, it's just from that content model.
What's the time span you've been doing this?
Over a year now.
Over a year?
Just over a year.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, because so we recorded, I think, like late May, June-ish.
Okay.
Of 2018.
Yeah.
And I made
You ever missed a week?
Yeah.
How many?
1.
1 week.
The only time I've ever missed a week is when I was going every 2 weeks.
When you were what?
Because when I started, I only did it every 2 weeks.
Right.
Because when I started editing them, it took me forever.
So you missed a week because of lack of content?
Yeah. Like, so I did the first 3 episodes I bulk shot before. I made sure I edited like 1.5 of them before I published it. I put it out like July 30th, I think, or July 31st.
It's a great day, yeah.
Yeah. But at the time, I was thinking back to it. It was a weird time for me to do it because I went to my dad's wedding. I moved on like 2 days after, or the day after I put the podcast out, I moved from my apartment to here.
Yeah.
And then like a couple days, like within a week.
Was it that bad?
What?
That podcast? You had to get out?
No. And then I went to my dad's wedding.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I have 6 weeks of content. I'm fine. But like,
sorry to cut you off.
No,
I just picture at your dad's wedding giving the speech like, "What's up, everybody?"
See, but that wasn't even like everyone makes fun of me for that.
So how did that develop?
That was just the first episode. Like,
did you do that in the first episode?
I'm pretty sure. Because like I didn't want to be like, "What's up, guys?" or like, "What's up?" Like I just.
Did you consciously do it?
Yes. Because
you wanted a shtick.
I didn't want a shtick. I wanted an intro that wasn't just guys or wasn't just girls. Like I wanted something that was everybody.
Yeah.
So what's going on, everybody? And like I didn't realize I say what's going on, like just and like someone be like, "Hey, what's up?" I'll be like, "Hey, what's going on?"
Yeah.
And it was just like something I said, and then I wanted it to be like an inclusive intro. I didn't want it to be just guys. Like, "What's up, guys?"
Got it.
So that's why I went with everybody.
Fascinating that you actually like thought about it that deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got the intro.
Very cool.
But yeah, and then back to missing an episode. So I had the first 3 bulk shot, 6 weeks worth of content every 2 weeks. So I had 2 months to find one, and I just wasn't getting anything. Like nothing was happening. And then I missed one. I recorded. Will Carey was the first one I recorded in this apartment.
Cool.
And yeah, he was the fourth guest, but I didn't have, when I was supposed to have recorded, or was supposed to put out an episode. So it was like, it was you, 2 weeks later, Matthew Dore, and then 2 weeks after that, Josh Reyes. And then 2 weeks came nothing, a week, and then Will Carey. So there's a 3 week gap between episodes, episode 3 and episode 4, instead of a 2 week gap. So that's the only time I've ever missed an upload, was when I was bi-weekly.
And now you're like 2 months in advance.
2 months
weekly.
in advance. Yeah.
That's sick.
And I never did the takeaways episode for the first 9 episodes either. So that was just...
What was the theory behind that? More content?
More content was the big one. I messaged a guy, his name's Mark Metry. I messaged him on LinkedIn. We connected somehow. And I was like, he's in his like LinkedIn bio, it's his top 100 podcast. So I was like, okay, let me message this guy. So I was like, hey, like, how do you grow a podcast? And he clearly gets this question all the time. Just send me a link to an article he wrote. So I read it, but then I made sure I followed up and I asked him questions specific to a couple things. And he was replying with audio messages, which was interesting, which was like unique to me at the time. No one had ever done that to me before.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, I need to start doing that. It's just easier. But he said like, yeah, you just got to post more, man. Like, get more content out there. Like, that's a big thing. Like, post more podcasts. Like, don't just keep posting more clips, post more podcasts.
Yeah.
Actually, if you go back to the first Takeaways episode, which is after Roland Bassett's 10th episode, I played his audio clip in there, I think.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure I played it. But so he's like, post more podcasts. At this time, like, this was still when I was still figuring out the podcast workflow. It took me forever. Like, probably 10 to 15 hours. At that point, it was 10 to 15 hours to do the whole editing.
Wow.
When it first started, it was probably 20 hours.
Yeah.
But so I was like still 10 to 15 hours to do the whole editing process. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I don't know how this guy expects me to be able to dwindle all this down and to do 2 interviews a week. Like, I can't do that. And then I was like, but then I realized it's like, it doesn't have to be an interview. He didn't say like do more interviews. He said just post more content.
Yeah.
And it was like, I listened to his podcast and he does a similar thing. He calls it flow. And it's where he just rants for 10 minutes. But I was like, I don't want to just rant for 10 minutes about anything.
Yeah.
So it's just following the Gary Vee content model, which is what I do for my content. It's my pillar piece of content is my podcast. I break it down into YouTube videos, which I then break down further into micro clips.
Yeah.
I then take my pillar piece of content and I just talk about my own podcast and break it down.
Have you ever thought of breaking down the Takeaways episode into content on like LinkedIn?
I've thought about it, but that just creates more work. Whereas,
because what I'm thinking is like, you can take your podcast, right? And if someone says something super smart, you can just talk about that in your takeaways and now have a really smart piece of content, and you're not stealing their idea. You're just a messenger of it, and you credit them. You say, on my podcast, this person said this. And it's like a double whammy. Yeah,
and so the reason I don't do that with the takeaways is because when I started, the whole point behind it was I wanted to be able to put out a new piece of content for the podcast that takes me like half an hour.
Gotcha.
I don't want it to become an extra podcast edit, because at the time when I started doing them, I didn't want them to be that. I did it because I didn't have the ability to edit it into video and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing I have thought about too is I can do micro takeaways, and I've done it once or twice. I need to make a better effort at LinkedIn, but I do micro takeaways where I can talk about a takeaway in less than 2 minutes, do a selfie video, and just post it to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about lining it up with the audio and cutting it, so I can literally just do that.
100%.
So that it has been, it's a way to talk about my podcast without posting a clip, and it's, so that's something I need.
It's something I think about a lot too, just in terms of value and time, right? A lot of people always say like, oh, should you do this and do this and do this and do this? And I always just say, estimate the amount of value that's going to provide and the amount of time it's worth. And is it worth that time to create that additional value? Because yes, adding thumbnail that's really well done is added value. Adding transcription is added value. Doing 2 a week is added value. Doing takeaways is added value. But like, there's always a time associated with it. And is that time worth the estimated added value? If you don't know, maybe test it for a while. But that's kind of what I would say. Because yes, it is added value to do more. But to some extent, like, there's diminishing returns in your time. So kind of my final question before we hop into a lightning round is why did you want to do this for your 50th episode? Why did you want to be interviewed, and why did you think that was a good idea? And why did you choose me to interview you?
You don't remember, do you?
What?
This was your idea.
I know, but why did you say yes?
Because like at first I hadn't really thought about it, because she was like, why don't let me interview you? Like, and at the time I was like, I don't know, like at the time I'd only done my interviews, and I was like,
so when I first said it, you didn't know, and you thought about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But now I've just been like, but since then I've posted some like bonus content, different things like that. And I'm like, it'd be cool, you know, and this was also part of the reason, I guess, why I wasn't so like, I need to make my 50th one like super special.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll do my 50, but then we'll like, what will make it different from everything else is this episode where we'll sit down and we'll talk about everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and with this one, obviously there won't be takeaways.
Yeah.
But I'm debating whether I should re-record my trailer because it's still the first trailer I ever put out.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit different. But so the reason I want to do it is like I've just kind of like loosened up in terms of what I do with the podcast. Like I'm not as stressed about it all the time, and I want it to be perfect. Like even when it comes to the audio quality, it used to stress me out. Like if my dog would bark, I'd be out of the world. Yeah. And now it's like it happens. There's no point stressing about it. I can't remove that.
I even think if you're just like, nah, it's my dog barking, whatever, and keep going like that for people is like almost a connection point. Like, oh, he has a dog. Oh, he has a sense of humor. Like, oh, he's real. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's just in terms of doing this. Like, I was just like, it'll be cool, like to sit down and talk about it. Like, this will be the way to talk. Like, this will be the way of making the 50 milestone something. Yeah. Like, I'm not just glossing over it.
Love it.
That was kind of the reason behind it.
Very cool. So that you want to do this for your 50. You've done 50 episodes. So after everything that you've done, what is your vision for the next 50? What do you kind of see yourself conquering? What do you see for the podcast? What are your goals now? Because I think obviously in the beginning, you think you know what you want to do, but then going through the motions, you've learned so much. I know cutting down your workflows, accepting guests that don't have 10,000 followers. You go to New York and interview bigger names. You're not getting phased. You're getting connections. You're doing online ones. So much has changed. So now that you're here, what's your vision for the next 50?
I don't really have one. Like, I'm just going to kind of keep doing what I'm doing and evaluating what I'm doing as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Like, because I could have, like, if you'd asked me this question at the beginning, I would have told you something. I don't know what I would have said. Like, what is your vision once you hit 50? I don't know. It wouldn't have been this.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I could tell you something like I want it to be this, but I know it probably won't be.
Yeah.
Because I change my mind all the time, which is something I never used to do with the podcast.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, 50, it's like starting to really become something within the next 50.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put that kind of pressure on myself because I don't want to be like within the next 50 episodes, this is going to be my job. I'm going to be making real money from this.
And you don't want to do it for the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
Either. Like, I'm sure you could monetize it quicker if you did certain things, but that necessarily A, won't make you happy, and B, won't give you longevity. So I think like you got to do it for the right reasons.
Yeah. So in terms of what the next 50 are going to look like, I really don't know. Yeah. Like I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure I will definitely make changes along the way as to what's working and what's not.
That kind of goes with the flow too of not really caring about your 50th and just keep rolling like it's just another episode.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm always reevaluating and doing what I'm doing. Like we talked before, like maybe I'll post twice a week, but I don't know if I'm going to do that. And like maybe like the YouTube change is going to be something. So
got you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, the last thing I wanted to do is this lightning round. Every time you have a guest on, you do a lightning round. So I wanted to throw it back at you. First thing that comes to mind, I don't want you to overthink it. I just want you to say it and live with it. Okay? Favorite guest of all time?
Cannot answer that question. There's no way I could pick, like, I know this is rapid. This is what happens in mine.
This isn't how you do rapid fire, Jake.
No. And that's why I used to call my questions rapid fire.
Yeah.
But then I switched it. I just called it Q&A now. And like, they're not questions, but like, I could never pick my favorite guest of all time.
First guest that comes to mind when you think of your podcast then? Doesn't have to be your favorite. What just stands out right away?
First guest that comes to mind. I want to say Joey Kidney, just because that's probably the one that gets brought up to me the most.
Love it.
But because he's probably he's in terms of following the biggest one I've had thus far. Gotcha. Yeah.
Best story you've ever had on your podcast?
Best story I've ever had.
Which comes to mind, yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know. The first story that comes to mind that someone told me.
If I came up to you and said, hey, what's a story that's been on your podcast? What would be the first one you'd tell me?
I would probably ask you what you're interested in first. Like the one that comes to mind, like there's a couple different ones.
Yeah.
The Darren Pang one where he got into a bar fight was one that comes to mind. Yeah. Which like he told me about this, and this is the only problem, which is why I want to do twice a week. So I know I'm going on a tangent again. But so Darren Pang tells me a couple of stories. I'm like, these are awesome.
Yeah.
Goes on Spit and Chicklets a month later. My podcast is coming out in like 2 weeks and tells like half the stories, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
I can't like. Obviously, like, so that's where I'm like, maybe if I post twice a week, they're coming out more frequently. So it's like I can be more current.
Yeah.
Like I interviewed a guy.
Or you should just said fucking posted it right there. Everyone's searching Darren Pang podcast.
Yeah. But which was that mind, like, because like I interviewed a guy that took a bunch of awesome shots from the Raptors playoff run.
Yeah.
And I posted it a month after the playoff run ended. So it's like if I post that like right after it ends, maybe it does a little better. So that's just a reason. But another story, like it was Lindsay Messler talking about someone squirting on her podcast. Was Lindsay Messler talking about someone talking about squirting on her podcast? I remember both of us in the room were like,
yeah, we're like, this is interesting. My social life podcast content.
Oh no, this is the story.
Okay.
This is probably one of my favorite stories, like the one that sticks out to me the most. I remember, like, I listened back to it so many times. It was Caleb talking about, it was in one of the getting to the end of the podcast, and he's talking about Gary, because I asked him, like, do you ever reflect, like, you got Crush It when you were 16, you read it, and now you work for Gary. I was like, do you ever think about that? And he goes, I try to every single day. And he goes, like, I just can think back to me, like, barely making it. He's like sitting at home watching Gary videos. He's like barely making it. And he's like, and now I'm here. And like, I just get chills every time I hear that story. It's like, that's one that really comes to mind. I don't know what, it's just, and it wasn't just the story, it was the way he delivered it. The way he said, like, barely making it. And he like did emotion with it as well. Like, that one just really stood out to me. Wow. It was cool.
That's amazing. Most shocking tactic someone's ever said on your show that they use on social media? I
don't know if it was shocking, but the one that made me laugh, it didn't make me laugh, but it was Consumed by Carlo talking about printing off. Print advertisements for his Instagram and hanging them up at popular tourist spots, being like popular Ottawa food blog or something like that. Hanging them up. Like, that was one that really stood out to me.
Amazing. Best feedback you've ever got?
Best feedback. I got some recently from a guest that's coming up who she said, you remind me of, I can't remember her name and my phone is recording. She's like, you remind me of this person. Like, I've recently started listening to this person and you remind me of her. And I'm like, okay. I Google this person's name and it's like, the first hit is like a little bio thing and it's like the best interviewer of our generation.
No way.
And I was like, that's cool. Like, I replied, I was like, holy shit, thank you. Like, I've never heard of this girl. She's like, me neither. She's interviewed over 1,000 people. She's considered one of the best people, like one of the best interviewers. She's like, just the way like you talk and like you're delivering, like, and I was like, that's really cool. So there's that one. The Narbar one was pretty cool. And
did I show you a video of him?
You told me about him.
I told you about him.
I've since
saw it. Okay.
Yeah, actually, no, you did show me.
Okay.
And then the other one is, I think you said it. I've gotten, what's his name? Oh, the Sean. Sean
from.
He's the host of Hot Ones.
Hot Ones, yeah.
I know it's Sean. I can see him.
Yeah, bald guy.
Yeah.
Sean Evans.
Thank you, Sean Evans. Yeah. I've gotten that one, and like, I don't like people say we sound the same, and I don't think we sound the same. I think our delivery is the same. In some respects.
Yeah, your voice isn't the same tone.
Yeah.
But your delivery's, you're bang on. That's exactly it. So last lightning round, biggest takeaway from this journey so far? If you could sum it up.
Oh, that's a tough one. This is weird being on the other side of these questions. Like, I always ask people these ones and they're like, whoa, the biggest takeaway from the podcast. There's a couple that come to mind.
Do it. I want to hear them all.
Like, people are just people is one.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't really get the like, holy shit. Like, I'm talking to this person.
Big celebrity answer. I'll tell you that for free, Jacob.
But yeah, people are just people is a big one. Another one is just start.
Yeah.
Just start's a big one.
Oh my God, dude. Like, I see that all the time. Yeah. Whenever I'm meeting people, they're asking me, should I? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
You should try something and figure out if it's right or wrong. And then if it's wrong, try something, figure out if it's right or wrong, try something. Just start, just go. Stop asking.
Like, I sat on the podcast for months before I started it.
100%.
Like, I got some gear for Christmas, and then I remember I recorded this 10-minute like about me thing when I didn't have a name. I was gonna call it Jack Sound, actually. That's what I was gonna call it, because my thing at the time was I had an Instagram, I had a sports, before I started this, I had a vlog channel, and then I had a sports show on YouTube called Jack Sports, where I talked about like sports news. And then I like stopped doing that one, and then I did another like kind of vlog channel. But I was like, I was gonna make Jack my thing, which is my initials, JK. And then like Hallie got me a shirt that has the logo I had on it. She got the font and everything. She got me a shirt. This is gonna call it Jack Sound. And there's like, if you go to Anchor, there's like somewhere you can find it. It's like, but I don't like, Anchor fucks with me. I can't figure it out probably. And I screwed it up when I uploaded it. And so there's only like the last like 15 seconds didn't come down. So there's like still part of it out there. And that was trash and I didn't like it. And then I didn't really have I was like, I don't want to interview people, but I don't know what it's going to look like. And then I finally had like, I work in social media. And like the thought process behind it was I was going to make this podcast so that I can learn. Yeah. Like, I'm going to learn from these people so that I can apply it to my YouTube and grow. And the podcast is my thing now. I don't even do YouTube right now. The other one, I had one, a really good one.
I like Just Start though, because even for me, there's something that I haven't even said publicly on the record that I've been meaning to do for like way too long, that now I can safely say it's a procrastination. I'm not meaning to do it anymore. And it's start an e-com store. Yeah. I've been meaning to do it forever. and I want to put it on the record. So I force myself to do it. Like by the end of the year, I plan to do it sooner.
Yeah.
But if I don't have it by the end of the year, like I owe you a steak dinner because I need something at this point to force me because I've been procrastinating so long.
Yeah.
So just start. That's something that I'm going to apply.
I remember the last
And what's the last one?
Is don't be afraid to make changes.
Yes.
Because
that was something you struggled with in the beginning.
And now like I go back and I'm like, I've changed my clips so many different times.
Yeah.
Now. I'm even right now debating changing what the cover of the podcast looks like.
Yeah.
I'm debating changing it from, obviously if I do make this change, you won't see it for probably 2 months because the end slates are all the current podcast cover.
For sure.
But I'm debating making it me holding a phone out with the social media logos on it. Mm-hmm. Because I love my Polaroids. I think that's great. And I will never stop taking the Polaroid photos. Mm-hmm. But the Polaroid photo on the cover doesn't really tell you what the podcast is
100%.
about. I want to make it so when you look at the cover, you go, oh, this is about like Instagram and YouTube. And like, because right now people don't get that. So
with
I think
like
I need
a
to
growth
make a change.
sign through it, I'd say.
Yeah, something like that.
Social media growth, image wise, yeah. And you holding it out as the host.
Yeah, so I'm debating making that switch. So, yeah, but don't be afraid to make changes. And like the way I've kind of like told people, and people are talking to me about this.
Yeah, I
said it on a podcast recently. It should be out by the time that this one's out. Like I was a guest on another podcast, and I was like,
humble flag.
People are always like afraid to make changes because like my audience, like they're gonna be like thrown off. Like people aren't gonna realize. And I'm, what audience?
Yeah.
Like I don't have a crazy audience. I'm gonna make a change. No one's really gonna notice. No one's going to care if they do.
100%, man.
And if people notice, great. 4 people noticed of my like small audience right now, right? So it's like make the changes because you make it a bigger deal.
And when you break it down, it's really value based, right? If you change the logo, no one's going to stop listening to the podcast because you changed the logo. If you change the amount of value you're bringing, they're gonna, right? And I always use the example of Gary recording clips in an alleyway and getting millions of plays. It's because he's providing the same amount of value as if he was in a production studio. Like it doesn't matter the location, the imagery, the lighting, like it's the value at the end of the day, right? People want that knowledge. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Jacob, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on your own podcast. It's a tad narcissistic, but we'll let it slide. So I just want to give you the floor where you can, where can the people find you? Plug everything and anything
that you got right now. Yeah. So obviously if you're listening to this podcast, that's dope. Thank you. If this is for some way, somehow the first podcast of mine you've ever listened to, I would highly recommend you subscribe and check out some of the interviews. It'd mean a lot to me. If you've listened this entire way, that also means a lot to me. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm at the Jacob Kelly. I always post photos with my guests. And when I post remote ones, I make them take a selfie with their computer screen of me holding up. I have this light box with the episode number on it. So that's a little bit of a unique thing I do with the podcast. And you can also find me on Twitter. I'm at the Jacob Kelly on Twitter as well. I've been making a more of an effort to post kind of my thoughts when it comes to social media and different things and content on my Twitter, so you can see kind of how my brain works on there. And definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You can search me up. I'm Jacob Kelly. I need to be posting more content there, so if you keep adding me, then maybe I'll start posting more content. And if you'd like to follow the podcast, you already know we're right here. And search us up on YouTube, My Social Life. I'll be making more of an effort on there as well. And at My Social Life Podcast on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you once again for coming on the podcast. And I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. Whether you've listened the entire way or only through bits and pieces, I really appreciate you taking the time to check this out. Guys, do me a favor and go follow Jacob on everything. I'll make everything linked in the show notes below. And if you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Instagram at Hayden Cashion, HaydenCashion. I run a digital marketing business here in Ottawa, helping business achieve real business results through social media ads. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. Here's to another 50 episodes for Jacob. We'll talk soon.
Nailed it.